Stripling is a giant. Also, Carlos Correa signed a 13-year, $350 million deal with the San Francisco Giants. Welcome to the Just Baseball Show. I'm Peter. That's Aram. It is Thursday, December 15th, and we're playing general manager for the Minnesota Twins at the back end of this video. But first, I say video, podcast. It's all on YouTube. It's all on Spotify. Thank you all for listening. We're back. Good to see you, Aram. It's been a while since you and I hopped on the mic. How are you?
I know, dude. The schedule has been wild with the winter meetings, us bootstrapping it, different time zones, then my flu bout. Good to be back with you, brother. Really excited to talk about the Twins, even though they've been giving me a headache. But of course, we got to start with this Correa signing, because I know that was the team that you had Correa going to, was the San Francisco Giants. And it seemed like the second, you made the prediction before this, but it seemed like the second that Judge, went to the Yankees, it was like, okay, they got to pivot to the next best guy, right? And that's exactly what they did. Usually it's not that predictable, but they did it. And it was seamless. You had it early in the offseason, and honestly, I figured they'll sell out for Judge, and they did. It just didn't work out, and they end up getting a pretty nice contingency plan here with Carlos Correa. This helps them a lot, because I make fun of the roster. It's not great. It's still not fantastic, but hell, it looks a lot better even just with the Correa edition. But they've made some other small ads too.
Yeah, they have. Especially we'll talk about Ross Stripling for about maybe a minute or two, because he did have an ERA around 3 last year. And the Giants are kind of that team that's known for bringing in the veteran pitcher and getting the most out of them. Alex Cobb for one, Anthony DeSclafani for one, Alex Wood another, and now they bring in Stripling and they bring in Manaea. And then, of course, they have Logan Webb at the top of the rotation, who is anything but a veteran, but is easily the best pitcher on the roster. And it doesn't seem like Carlos Rodon will go back at this point. The reason why that felt predictable, because I've been wrong. Like, I had Senga going to the Dodgers. I had Bogarts going to the Diamondbacks. But with these shortstops, it almost seemed easy. It seemed like if the Giants didn't get Judge, which I didn't think they would.
Yeah, we all thought he was a Yankee.
We did. The Giants were going to give him a huge offer, and there was a report that came out with the Yankees that they weren't going to be able to match it. And I thought, that's bullshit. I mean, that's just not going to happen. The Yankees are going to be able to match it, and then he's going to go to the Yankees. But the Giants have all this money to spend. Farhan Zaidi said that we will spend, and they spent with Carlos Correa, who at this point, I think you're splitting hairs with Trey Turner, but those two are easily the best shortstops on the market at this point. Bogarts with the bat, definitely he is up there, and he got an 11-year, $280 million deal because the bat has been so consistent. But if you're looking for the full package, glove, been there before, he's a World Series champion, and he performed in the playoffs, then the bat. And I think what I've been hearing a lot about Correa, and this is more coming from Dodger fans who I can't wait for them to see him.
Number one villain now. Number one villain for Dodgers fans.
And a lot of fans who missed out on him are saying, well, Correa hasn't been healthy. Correa hasn't been healthy all these years. And to that, I'd say, I kind of think that narrative is overblown at this point.
Yeah, I do too.
In 2019, he only played 75 games. And then the year before, 110, 109 in 2017, was injured 100%. But then he played a full 60-game season, played 58 games. Then the next year, he played 148 games. Then he was dealing with a little bit of an injury, but he still played 136 games.
Yeah.
I don't think that Carlos Correa should be known as this injury-prone guy at this point. I think what should be highlighted the most about him is his playoff acumen, one of the best gloves in the sport, and a guy who can really hit anybody at this point, because he is, the last couple of seasons, the bat is basically the same as Bogarts if we're looking at a WRC plus. The glove is miles and miles better. And if you're looking for a guy who's been there, done that, that's Carlos Correa. But it took 13 years. $350 million. What do you think about that contract when you first saw it?
I mean, yeah, man, it's pretty wild, because all of these massive deals have kind of made me a bit numb. But if this was the first deal off the board, I think I would have gotten lightheaded. This is a crazy contract. But at the same time, what we're seeing is you've got to give up those age 38, 39, 40 years for be able to get these guys. And at the end of the day, 26 or 27 million really average annual value for a guy of Carlos Correa's caliber. Well, it allows you to do more in his prime. And you're going to suffer on the back end a little bit, but we know you just spoke to all the intangibles that Correa as a vet, even if he's not on the field all the time and not a major impact guy, he's still going to give you some value. And what's $26 million going to be in 2035? I have zero idea, but given the change we've seen in the market in general, I think it'll definitely be quite the discount, compared to what we think it is now. The one thing I will say, and I want to kind of accentuate your point here, is that the Giants really needed that franchise, that face of the franchise, right? Because you have Posey retire maybe a little bit earlier than they accounted for. Brandon Crawford is a very important guy to that franchise, and he'll probably slide to third. But he's just not good enough to be that face of the franchise. He's a big part of it in their heart and soul, but just not there. And some of their prospects like Marco Luciano and whoever, like they're not on that like can't miss trajectory where you could say, oh, that guy's going to be the face of our franchise, like we've seen with some other teams that like Julio Rodriguez and some others with the Mariners. So I think this also gives them that marketable face of the franchise that I think they were really looking for here. Like beyond just making the roster better, this is the guy that they're going to build around now, I think, for the next decade plus. And they really needed that. They really needed to jumpstart this thing. And, we know San Francisco's never going to fully rebuild. That's not what they do. Just like Chicago Cubs are not going to do that anymore. And, some of the bigger market teams with good fan bases aren't going to do that. I think this was a great move, but I'm very interested to see what else they can do to make the rest of this team competitive, because they've still got some work to do.
Here's how I've been internalizing it in my head. With the Carlos Correa deal, like, would we have been that blown away? We would have. But if he signed a 8-year, $350 million deal, signed for 43.75 per, that is an enormous deal. Aaron Judge signed for 9 years for 360. But again, he is 3 years older than Carlos Correa, or at least 2. Aaron Judge is entering his age 30 season. Correa is entering his age 28 season. So it is about 2 years. Would that have been so crazy to think? So the way I internalize it was he signed an 8-year, $350 million deal and then another 5-year deal for free. That's how kind of I think about it. Trey Turner, let's say he signed a 7-year, $300 million deal. Then you get the next 4 free. Xander Bogaerts, 7 years, $280 million. Like that, at least in my mind, kind of puts it in perspective a little bit. Does that help?
It's funny. It makes sense because like most of these contracts are deferred, and like this is kind of a more aggressive form of deference, right? Like
exactly.
Their average annual value is way, all of these players, based on what Judge set the market at, they're all worth more than $27 million. But because of the guarantee that they're getting with all of these years, it's almost like a pay deference. So I think that's a good way to put it. And I think that's why you're happy to do it if you're the Giants. And I mean, this is a rare opportunity. This free agency crop was a rare opportunity to get that face of the franchise. And I don't know if there's quite that level of face of the franchise, do it all kind of marketability outside of Aaron Judge. I'd say Correa is right there. I don't know what it is. Maybe maybe that's just a bias, personal bias, but there's just something that it factor. And I think it's the winning. It's the being there in the postseason. He's already one of the most successful postseason players ever, and he's 28 years old. Like there's something about Correa that screams like face of the franchise and a guy that I want to build around a little bit more than those other shortstops. And again, that might be a bias myself, but that's just where I'm at. So I love that move. I loved the Mitch Haniger move. I think they've done some good things. I think some guys will bounce back this year. I think Crawford will be fine at third base. And we'll do a little bit more with the Giants episode, but how much does this change your perspective on the Giants? And how much more work do you think they have to do?
So I don't think that they have to do a ton, because right now I'm on Roster Resource and this is their lineup. They have Thairo Estrada at second, who, he was a 722 OPS guy last year who stole 20 plus bags. He's a fine second baseman, especially at age 27. Mike Yastrzemski is going to be their center fielder. I'd love to see them get an additional outfielder, and I think that they will. I kind of wish that they got Brandon Nimmo But Mike Yastrzemski, I guess, is fine, but I expect them to upgrade there. Obviously, they have the big fish, Carlos Correa, who I think you could argue is a top 3 shortstop in Major League Baseball at this point. Jock Peterson raked last year, and I'm excited to see what he does this year, betting on himself. He could be in for a big year. Mitch Haniger,
I love him.
You love Mitch Haniger. I love Mitch Haniger. Who doesn't love Mitch Haniger? Then you got Brandon Crawford at third, who is not that far removed from an amazing offensive season. And then last year he had a really down year, but he was also injured a little bit. Could he at
His
least
defense suffered too? So maybe just being at third, like he might be a bounce back candidate too.
Yes, and Brandon Crawford is going to be 36 years old, but if he can give us 80% of what he did in 2021, that's a very solid player. And then you got JD Davis, who breaks sometimes. Lamont Wade Jr., who's one of my kind of favorite underrated player. Remember, the guy's only 29 years old.
He was hurt all last year.
All last year, but he's a good player. And then you got Joey Bart, who we both don't necessarily like that much. So there are upgrades to be made. I don't think this team is done. But going back to the Correa point for a second, because this isn't the Giants episode, we will have a Giants episode. Who was the only player age 38 or above who played middle infield last year? There was one. Because we have to remember, Carlos Correa, 28, when he retires or when this contract is over, he'll be 41. Trey Turner, around the same age. Bogarts, around the same age. 38 now, not 41, who's the only infielder, second base or shortstop, age 38 or over, who played last year?
Oh, that's a good question.
It's a great question.
38 and like just played like a full season, or at least like enough to qualify.
Enough to qualify. Maybe even not enough to qualify, but played
like a good substantial amount, more than Robinson Cano did.
Robinson Cano is the only one.
Okay,
Robinson Cano is the only one.
Yeah,
and I thought to myself, I mean, it's a position where you need your legs under you, and where will these guys be? But at the same time, where will Farhan Zaidi be?
Yeah, exactly.
Where will Dave Dombrowski be?
That's what I said about Dave Dombrowski. He's going to be like fully retired and maybe in a home at that point. Like it's fine.
I'm 25 years old. I might be popping out my third kid when Correa is done with his contract at 38 years old.
Yeah.
Like these are things that at the time in 2034 is $26 million going to be the qualifying offer.
What I'm saying. Yeah, exactly. So
we're dealing with contracts that they aren't really worried about. Also, breaking news: Noah Syndergaard has agreed to a deal with the Dodgers. So,
oh my gosh! So now people are going to talk themselves into Syndergaard. That's how that usually works.
Of course, and maybe he can regain some velocity, but we'll talk about that one at a later point. But Carlos Correa, a Giant, 13 years, $350 million. They also add Ross Stripling again to that rotation. The Giants are not done. I still think they should grab an outfielder. I still think that they should figure something out with catcher. I predicted, it wasn't really a prediction. It was almost something I thought that would be very cool, with Sean Murphy possibly going to the Giants, maybe putting Joey Bart in that deal. Maybe they're just going to give Joey Bart another chance. Remember, he was picked second overall.
Yeah, no, I mean,
and they have Patrick Bailey waiting.
And they took a guy in the Rule 5 that also catches, Blake Sable, who catches and plays outfield. So he's a contingency plan too. So yeah, I'm interested to see what they do, but they're definitely far from done. And I'm glad Correa is with a franchise like the Giants. I think it's a good place for him, and it's good for baseball.
And you were talking about your bias about Correa. I will play to wrap up on Correa. I will play the anti-bias, because I'm a Yankee fan, and I remember 2017 and the scandal a lot. I remember it. I remember every second of it. I remember Jose Altuve hitting the home run off Chapman and that sly smile, which made me want to punch Aroldis Chapman in the face. And then we found out about the buzzer, which I don't even know if it actually came to be.
Apparently all debunked, yes.
Yeah, it got debunked. So, but I still think, like, the view of Carlos Correa isn't as one of the best shortstops in baseball because of that. Like, you don't care about that, which I totally respect, because it has gotten debunked at this point. You view him as maybe the second best overall shortstop. Tatis, Turner, they're all in that.
With all the leadership qualities you want in a guy that's been there and won on the biggest stages and performed in the postseason.
Exactly. And I think people are like, well, this is way too much for Correa. He's been hurt, cheater, all that kind of stuff. I think at this point, pull up Correa's Fangraphs, Check the defensive runs saved because he leads shortstops in the past couple of years. Check WRC plus because he's right up there with anybody. Check all the numbers.
And listen to an interview.
This guy is about as good of a shortstop as we have in Major League Baseball. If you don't want to rank Fernando Tatis Jr. number one, like we're going to do our top 10s. And I think that's a conversation based of like, is he going to play shortstop? Do we even rank him there? What are we going to get when he comes back? I assume we're still going to get the same version. How good is Trey Turner? A year older now, right? Could Correa realistically be the best shortstop in Major League Baseball? I don't think that's a far-fetched opinion. I actually think you could easily make that opinion. So 13 years, 350 million sounds enormous, and it is. But another great thing that Eno Saris said, if you feel like everyone's getting overpaid, that's the market. That's just the market.
Yeah.
Everyone is getting overpaid. The collective bargaining agreement, it brings in years of labor peace. These teams are very confident that there will be money to spend, whether it be from TV deals, whether it be from extra added revenue, that they can make these deals.
Yep.
And Carlos Correa was the best free agent on the market, not named Aaron Judge.
Correct. Yep. And I'm loving it. So and I love the interviews. That's something I can speak to. Like just listening to him, this guy's a smart dude that young players love him. Jeremy Payne credits him even after he left for, guiding him. Guys with the Twins, Royce Lewis credit him. So he's going to serve that role with the Giants as well, really well.
Carlos Correa is a Giant, but more importantly, Ross Stripling is a Giant.